4 things no one tells you about retiring overseas. We're going to tell you today. I'm Kathleen Petticord.
I'm Liv Sutton.
Welcome to a new edition of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. We and many others write every day on the benefits, the advantages, and the upsides of reinventing your life in retirement in a new country. And there are many advantages for sure, but it's not all roses and rainbows. There are some downsides, and honestly, what they amount to are challenges that you may not be prepared for, and we want to point them out today because the best way to overcome them is to be prepared for them. Forewarned is forearmed.
Right. And well, the first one is that is not even forewarned, is that you're not going to be able to know everything before you go.
Right.
You won't be able to figure out all the pros and all the cons of any given destination or any thin slice destination within a country, because there are country issues, there are specific locale issues, and you'll, no matter what questions you ask, how many experts you talk to, how much you read of what we write,
how much research you do,
you won't know all the pros and cons. And the main reason is because a pro to you is a con to someone else, and a con to you is a pro to someone else.
Exactly.
There's no way to know what any given trigger is for someone. And we had people years ago now who got very upset with us because we hadn't told them in Belize that they burn their fields every dry season.
Farmers burn their fields
in preparation for the next cycle,
planting
season. And so that was it. That we were dead to them, and that was the end of their looking to do anything overseas.
It wasn't intentional. We weren't trying to hide that fact.
Right.
It's just, but that gives you an example of, it's not possible to list out every detail of every aspect of life in a country. That list would be so long I can't imagine it.
Right.
So that someone could review it and say, oh, this is a deal breaker. Okay, next country. There's no way to do that. The only way to find out if a country is going to work for you, is a fit for you, is to go spend an extended time in the country.
Right. And we recommend going to the country in the off season, in the in the down season. And for Central America, that would be the rainy season. So October, November, to see if you can tolerate the amount of rains that may be coming.
Right.
In this case, the burning season, if you will, in Belize is around March and April.
And it's not uncommon. Many countries in this part, Panamanian farmers do it as well. It's very common in Asia in many places too.
Right. And so if you have a problem with that, you shouldn't be moving to a third world country. But for other things can, somebody may have to have a certain amount of internet speed.
Right.
Well, that varies. In Panama City, for example, we get 100 megabit upload and download. I think 300 megabit in the office. We have really fast internet in Panama City. Out here at Los Islotes, where we're filming right now, we have 3 megabit. But I was able to do a webinar the other day, and it was fine. So if internet's important to you, it's the specific location, not necessarily the country.
Exactly.
There's a lot of dialing in that you have to do.
Right. We call it thin slicing, and it's critical because imagine, just to give you maybe a perspective on this, what would life be like living on Central Park in Manhattan compared with what life would be like living in the little town of Woodstock, Illinois, where Leif and I happened to spend some time last summer. Entirely different in every way.
Right, and different considerations to take into.
And so the point is, you can't talk about what it would be like to retire in the United States, and you can't decide if that's a good idea or not for you. You have to look at not only a state, and not only a region, but a specific town or city or neighborhood, in fact. And that, of course, is true everywhere in the world, anywhere in the world you might be considering.
Right. But when we say there's high-speed internet in a country, there is high-speed internet in the country. It may not necessarily be the speed you need in the place you want to be.
Exactly.
So that's just one example of information that you have to dial into to understand, is it really a con for you, or can you work around it?
Right. And also, what are your deal breakers? It comes down to everywhere has its pluses and minuses. And you need to make lists. I'm a big believer in lists, and I think they have a big role to play in choosing a place to retire overseas. Make a list of the pros of the place and of the cons of the place, and then weigh it out, balance it out. And where do you land? If you find something on the cons list that's a deal breaker for you, well, then move on. Be honest with yourself. Don't compromise on the things that really matter to you, because you could be setting yourself up to end up in a situation where you're not happy. And the whole point of this, our conversation today, is there are challenges. There are downsides. You are going to face struggles. But the point is that you're on your way to a new, better, richer life. So don't set yourself up to fail in that objective by compromising on something that is really important to you.
Right.
All right. Point number 2 that maybe you've never heard because it's not often talked about, honestly, is that not only do you need a budget, a monthly budget of income or nest egg for living, you need a capital budget for making the move. So when we talk about we've done a podcast recently on places where you could retire on $1,000 a month. That's very possible. You could also retire on $10,000 a month. But what neither of those budgets would include would be all of the getting settled, getting established costs, which are a separate budget.
And people think about things like shipping, which I don't recommend anyway, so that wouldn't be a cost. Airfare and hotels for getting to a place and checking it out before you find a place to live. But then the cost of getting residency, so the government fees, but also the attorney's fees for that. The cost of just setting up a new household anywhere. If you move from one state to another in the U.S. and you ship all of your stuff, okay, then probably you have everything. But if you move from Arizona to Illinois, as my mother did many years ago, well, even bringing everything from Arizona, she still had to buy stuff in Illinois, like a snow shovel, for example. That's a small item.
But moving to a new country, not everyone ships. A lot of people don't ship, which means you're starting from nothing. You don't have a fork, a spoon, a bowl, a cup to your name. So you have to really allow for all of that so that it's not a struggle and so that you aren't being just unhappy and frustrated in what should be your honeymoon period of enjoying a new place because you're so stressed over, oh my gosh, I didn't factor in the cost of furnishing my apartment.
Or buying a vehicle when you arrive.
Right.
And what we find in many places, especially in Central America, where people, they buy an Ocean View property or whatever, and they then go to build a house, then they don't account for what they don't know and the unexpected costs, and they end up either not being able to finish the house or finish it the way they wanted to. So you do need to plan for that. Like we've renovated in however many countries, and every renovation project has gone over even the budget that we set with the contractor because of unforeseen factors. You need to account for the unforeseen factors when moving overseas.
Right. Okay. Point number 3 that no one really talks about, or at least I'd say maybe we don't talk about enough, and that is that at some stage after having made this move, maybe a month in, a year in, or maybe several years in, you're going to experience a feeling of what I think can only be described as panic. I refer to it as the panic factor. And I may have been talking about this for decades, and I've experienced it myself in every one of our moves. But sometimes when I've made this point to others who I meet at conferences, for example, readers who come and join us for one of our live events, and they'll say, well, I don't think that's going to happen to me. I've done my research. I've visited the country 3 times.
I'm ready to make this move.
I'm ready. I'm committed. I'm excited. I'm fine. I appreciate the tip, but I'm fine. And I've had the experience many times now, having done this for over decades, of seeing those people down the line at another event or somewhere, and they'll say, I was so sure that I was going to be fine, but in fact, 6 months after I made my move, I woke up in the middle of the night one night and I was in a cold sweat and I was, as you said, panicked. And what they've also said, and this of course is gratifying because we're here to help. That is the whole point of all of this. I've heard many times as well, that person who went through that moment of panic said, but I remembered you telling me it would happen. And so then I knew it was okay. And that's
because the upside to that is it will pass.
Right.
You just have to give it some time, and the panic will be for different reasons. Some people we've heard from is just panic about finances. So you didn't know what you didn't know you were going to have for expenses, and how are you going to deal with that? Sometimes it's you wake up and, oh my goodness, I've left my friends and family, and we'll talk about that in a second. But and what do I do?
Right.
But it does go away, and the panic could happen 3 weeks into your move, 6 months, a year. In fact, one of our colleagues said he was sure, and it hadn't happened to him. It hadn't happened to him, and he was very well settled in his first country. He's been moved to many countries since, and it still happened to him after he was
some
well
years.
Well settled.
Yeah. And so, as Leif said, the best advice for this is to wait it out. It will pass. But what can you do in the meantime? I recommend that you allow yourself to indulge in the things that attracted you to the country in the first place. Right. So if you moved to Ambergris Caye, Belize because you love to dive and you never had enough opportunity to dive in your working life, and you suddenly are starting to feel panicked because you're feeling alone or you're missing your family and your friends, well, plan a diving excursion. Go spend a weekend diving. Do the thing that you love that attracted you to that place, and remind yourself why you made the decision. It can be something as small as that, getting out in the water. If it was the Caribbean Sea that appealed to you, well, go let yourself enjoy it and remind yourself why you made the decision. It wasn't a wrong decision, but nothing is going to be 100% smooth sailing. Number 4, our fourth tip that we'd like to offer is simply your family and friends probably won't, at least not all of them, and maybe none of them, are going to understand why you're doing this, why you want to upend your life at this stage of life in this dramatic way. They may not understand when you tell them your plan. They may not understand after you make your move, and they may never understand. They may never come around.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right. And so our advice is find new friends. One way to do that is through online expat forums, and through some of the forums and opportunities that we have for you to interact with others. But the same as you were saying that, it reminded me in the recent in the Modern Family series that Jay's friend decided to up and move to Costa Rica, and Jay didn't understand. He didn't get it, and the friend actually moved to Costa Rica and had a panic attack and moved back to California.
We hope that's not your story.
That's not the case, but there are people who do understand out there, and again, there are expats in all the destinations that we talk about, and so you can find people of the same mind out there, and still keep your old friends. Just because they don't understand why you moved overseas doesn't mean you still don't have things in common.
Exactly. And one tip that a long-term expat friend of ours gave me years ago that I've remembered is, once you make this move, and if you stay on this path, as we now have been living outside the States for 23 years, we are well and surely on this path, and not going back to the United States at this stage of our lives for sure. But that doesn't mean we're completely disconnected from the United States. We're still, of course, in touch with our family and old friends from where we grew up and where we were working before we made the move. Right. And the tip that my friend gave me years ago has helped me to manage relationships that I want to keep, that are very important to me back in the States, while always building and cultivating new relationships, friendships in these places where we're spending time. And that is, let them be separate. Don't try to speak about your expat life and your expat experiences with your family and friends back home. If they're not open to the ideas, if they're not interested in the ideas, that's okay. As Leif said, you still have the same points of like-mindedness that you always had. You still have the same connections. If they're your family, they're still your family. Even if to them it's insane that you're spending your time in Belize or Panama or thinking about moving to France. And that's okay. Just speak with them and have the relationship with them you've always had, while expanding your relationships. And as it's referred to, and I've come to respect this way of thinking about it, while finding your tribe, your new family, right, in your new home overseas, where you will meet loads of people who share these interests, who share this worldview, and who won't think you're crazy for wanting to do this.
That's not to say everybody you meet in your new expat home is someone you're going to want to be friends with, but that's a subject for another podcast.
All right. Thank you, as always, for listening, for watching. Please keep reading. We'll be in touch again soon. I'm Kathleen Petticord.
Bye, everyone.